Joining me now on the NCERT textbooks is the Professor Michel Danino. And of course, he's been looking at the formulation of textbooks from classes 6 to 8 for middle stages, in fact. And as you all know, the NCERT is currently revising the syllabus for the textbooks according to the National Education Policy. Professor Michel Danino, thank you so much for joining me for India Today. Of
Thank
course,
you.
my first question to you is that how do you see NEP being reflected in the new textbooks now as the head of the textbook committee for social sciences?
So I'm glad you're asking this question because it's the one question that so far the media has not focused on. And to me, it's the most important. Basically, the NEP is aiming at a complete paradigm shift in the field of school education. And we all know the evils of the old system, the mechanization of learning, the rote learning, and the fact that ultimately students come out very ill-equipped in moving on to the next stages of their education if they want to go into higher education. So there is a big deficit in the cognitive abilities that the school system, as it was and still is to a large extent, was promoting. So the NEP and a following document called the National Curriculum Framework for School Education, which was published in 2023 by a large committee headed by the late Dr. Kasturi Rangan. And that's a 600-page document with a lot of bolts and nuts about how the NEP should be implemented. These two documents have indeed been our reference framework. And so, as you mentioned, I'm been heading a team, fairly large team and fairly flexible also to prepare textbooks for social science in the field of the middle stage. So middle stage, what we call middle stage, is classes 6 to 8. And first of all, the main thing, the main visible change, there are many visible changes and some changes which are less visible. The most visible changes is that we're not publishing or preparing separate books for geography, history, political science, economics. That doesn't exist anymore. We're coming out for each class, each grade, with a single textbook. And many people actually fail to notice this basic fact, which means that since we are not accumulating the number of pages that the old 4 textbooks had together, we are therefore reducing the content drastically to be able to fit all these 4 disciplines into one textbook. And we are no longer speaking of disciplines, we are speaking of themes. We don't have 4 disciplines, we have 5 themes. The themes are India and the world. That is the first, which roughly corresponds to geography. Then the tapestry of the past roughly corresponds, I will explain why I say roughly later, which corresponds to history. And this is the only theme, basically, that the media, 99% of the articles have focused upon. Then there is a theme called cultural heritage, traditions of India. Then one which is governance and democracy, more or less political science, and finally, economic life around us. Now, why do I say roughly? Because NEP mandates upon us that we should be interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary as much as possible. See, the world is not a one-track affair. Life is not one track. Life integrates so many aspects together, and the world that the student is going to discover also, whether it's about India or the world at large. So therefore, we are kind of preparing the student to looking at many aspects together. So in chapters which you might call history chapters, you will find inputs from geography, from culture, the same in economics chapter, and so on. So this is one very important change. We don't have 4 textbooks, we have 1. We don't have 4 disciplines. We have 5 themes. And then what about the other main very visible changes, visible especially for the students? Many students have remarked on them immediately. is that there are lots of bright graphics, images, maps, and they occupy a lot of space, much more space proportionately. We have not done detailed calculation. In fact, one day we should. But I guess almost double the space that graphics used to occupy in earlier textbooks. So not only we have reduced already the volume in terms of number of pages, but in addition, we have reduced the volume that the text within that single textbook occupies. What is the net effect of this? The net effect is that we are drastically cutting the syllabus, which is, by the way, mandated by the NEP. And this is again something that has basically not been noticed. Of course, to the defense of media people and other commentators, it's true that the syllabus has not been published so far, and maybe we can discuss this a little later. So the syllabus is reduced, number one. Number two, what has been our main attempt is that in the text, the little text that remains, of course there is still text, we have tried to defeat possibilities of too much rote learning. So basically cutting down on the amount of data. What has been our main focus is essential principles, essential ideas, very important landmark events or figures or accomplishments and so on and so forth. So we have tried every time we were dealing with a particular topic, and these have been our instructions to the contributors, to really focus on what is it that really matters? What is it that we want the student to remember all his or her life? Because the evil of the present system is that the students used to forget everything almost the day after the exam. We don't want it to happen. Then that is not education. This is just an examination system. And that's not the purpose. That's not what the NEP wants. So basically, and the last point, therefore, by insisting on the important things to be thought about, is that we want to train the student to develop critical thinking. And that's why you will see, and I'm closing my long reply, excuse me, on this, that is why you will see a lot of questions thrown at the student, a lot of side boxes, which are not optional anymore, because in the old textbooks, they didn't have to learn the side boxes, and therefore everybody was just forgetting about them. Here, all the side remarks, side questions, side developments are an integral part, and sometimes even more important than the main text. So therefore, we keep engaging the student as much as possible. This is a long answer to your important question of how NEP is reflected in the textbooks.
So, but then how does the committee assess whether the student are able to critically think about history and society instead of memorizing the dates? How do you come to this assessment?
So it's a very valid question. And the fact is that we're not in a very good position to do that, because we have been given a very compressed timeline to produce the textbooks. Between the publication of the NEP, then it took another 3 years to produce the National Curriculum Framework. Then it took several months to prepare the draft syllabi, because our syllabi are still in a draft mode. They are finalized only when a textbook is finalized. So we have been given, with all this as a result, very, very tight timelines, deadlines to produce the textbooks. And therefore, though we have gone through multiple reviews, one thing we wanted to do, which we have not been able to do, to be quite honest, is that we wanted to do test runs of the textbooks of draft chapters in actual classrooms. We've not been able to do that. What we've been able to do is simply to submit to a fairly wide range of teachers and get their feedback. So teachers have been involved in the feedback process, in the review process. However, we have been dealing with a few students here and there randomly as we encountered them. And so far, but this is not representative of the whole of India, obviously. It's too a sample. But so far, the feedback has been quite positive. I'll give you one example where one member of our team encountered by chance teachers of a Bangalore school. I will not name it,
Okay.
and I will quote the testimony. I'm reading from the testimony from our team member. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, teachers praise the grades 6 and 7 textbooks. Students are liking the colorful, student-centric textbooks full of activities. This is in quotation marks.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Even higher grade students are reading them and asking teachers why these textbooks did not come when they were in grade 6 and 7. Now, I regard this as the highest compliment we can get. If students from higher grades are actually, and this I got also the same feedback, similar feedback from another school.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the textbooks are being grabbed by other students and they want to read them. Now, there cannot be a bigger compliment, but I agree that the extensive, feedback mechanism that we would have liked to really see the response of the students to their textbooks. And you're forgetting one very important element, the response of the teachers at the same time, because teachers are going to actually need more time to get used to the new textbooks than the students will. The students are at an age where they will very quickly adapt, especially because apparently from the feedback we are getting, they find the textbook much more attractive.
Right.
Either in weight of knowledge to absorb or weight of data, and also much more attractive in the whole design, which I have explained earlier. So therefore, we feel that the textbooks will not be any burden on the students to get used to. However, the whole mechanism of teacher training has to start and to really train the teachers to use the textbooks in the right spirit and with the right methods. So that is going to take years.
So, but I also want to understand, why isn't the revision process more open for public? You put the revision process in the public domain and perhaps let the public also give in their feedbacks, because it's done in a very opaque academic expert group. Which is why when the syllabus comes out, there are so many things that are missing, so many things have changed, and then this creates a political narrative for the NCRT.
Okay, let me answer the last part of your question. When you say so many things are missing and so many things have changed, I have been saying again and again, whenever I had a chance, nothing has been removed, nothing has been added to the old textbooks. We don't even look at them because we are writing the textbooks on a completely new foundation. So these are new. You are not going to compare textbooks of class 6 from Japan with textbooks from class 6 in Germany. You will not do this comparison. Therefore, the comparison with the old textbooks is, I've said it again and again, totally invalid. There's no justification for it. So nothing has been removed. But the first part of your question is, why was not the review process thrown open? My answer is, first of all, was it ever open to the complete public? I never heard.
No, in fact, it's never. So this
I've
is my
been following
question.
textbook writing in India for something like 25 to 30 years almost.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now you're asking suddenly, why should it not be open to the public? Maybe it could, but see, first of all, we are writing in a very compressed timeline, I remind you. Number two, what we've seen from the feedback post-publication is that if we were to do that, we would be getting hundreds, if not thousands, of contradictory feedback. How are we going to handle, even within our present circle of reviewers, which is not as narrow as you might think? There are NCERT faculty, there are schools involved, there are lots of experts from actually sometimes directly in touch with us, sometimes indirectly through other experts. So it's a pretty wide group of reviewers. We are not wanting to keep this in a very closed door group at all, because that would not be very fruitful. So in theory, you are right. But in practice, given the timeline and given the fact that we are going to get a completely confusing picture of contradictory feedback, I don't think that the review process should be thrown open to the public at large. What it should do is to involve a larger group of teachers, students, and why not parents. And this has not been feasible for very practical reasons of deadlines that we have to meet. So it has been done, but to a limited extent. This I can assure you.
So, my next question to you is, how do you ensure that the textbooks that are being created as part of the new education policy do not become a tool for political propaganda that is being used? The allegations that are being now made is that the government is using textbooks of children to bring in the political narrative that is synchronous in the country today.
Has the government used our textbooks? I don't think it has. They have read them to begin with. I don't think the government or the politicians, what they do, government, I do not know, honestly. But what politicians have been doing, and a certain number of media people, is that they have opened the textbooks and they have zeroed in on a few paragraphs on the Mughals, on Aurangzeb, or on the freedom movement, to the exclusion of everything else. They're not interested in how the new, NEP is now generating a completely new approach to education. They're not interested in the total changes of design and all that. So fine, fair enough. But first of all, I would say that, if any politician is going to use or misuse the textbooks, it's not our concern. Our concern is to do an honest job for keeping the student in mind. The kind of misuse that you're alluding to, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I mean, if you can give me a precise example, maybe I can answer. But the kind of misuse you're alluding to is actually keeping the student completely out of sight of the whole process. And for us, it's only the student that we are looking at. So our approach is totally different. We cannot possibly be concerned on how the textbook is going to be used or misused, because that use or that misuse will always happen at some level.
So, because, for example, that you've mentioned it yourself, that the media is focused on, let's say, there used to be an entire textbook first, 4 to 5 themes on just the Mughal rule in India, right from the Delhi Sultanate all the way till the Mughals. And that was reduced to one chapter. Of course, the rationale that's being given by the NCERT is that we need to include more, history, because India has a vast history. It's, too many topics together, but obviously allegations being made there, and broadly speaking there have been removal of certain controversial figures from the books. For example, if Nathuram Godse is removed from a particular political science textbook of a higher class, and then assassination of Gandhi,
You are
a chapter on
anticipating.
that is removed.
You are anticipating, because Nathuram Godse, first of all, cannot appear anywhere in 6, 7, or 8 textbooks, because we have
Yes.
reached the 19th century. 1857 is where we've ended with part 1 of 8. Now,
Of course,
logically,
that's a broad question, sir, because in 12th it has
in
been removed.
since grade 8 has only had its first part published, second part is going to appear somewhat sometime later this year, right?
That is also being awaited.
Of course, and lots of controversies are going to come up because well, that's what the media feed on. But what I can say is that very logically, what follows 1857 is going to be the start of the freedom movement. In fact, I may say that we are ending grade 8, second part, with the achievement of Indian independence. So first of all, one thing I want to answer your question. Very important to understand that in those 3 years, 6, 7, 8, we've been dealing as only one theme out of 5, excuse me. As one theme out of 5, we've been dealing with the entirety of Indian history, from almost prehistory, proto-history, the Indus, Harappan civilization, all the way to independence. In just 3 years, one theme out of 5. We don't have, I have to repeat, we don't have history textbooks, right? So this means that we have to compress a lot. How do you do this? You could do this by being extremely superficial and flimsy. We don't want to do that. We still want to go deep into certain issues. But then we have to become very selective. we cannot deal with the whole range of figures, the whole range of, for example, yes, we dealt with Akbar and Aurangzeb at some length, and we try to be fair to them. We don't try to glorify anybody or demonize anybody. Very consciously, at least we try. But we'd had to skip certain other important personalities, like, say, for example, Shah Jahan. We could have
Mm.
spent 3 pages on Shah Jahan. There was no
Yes.
space for that. So a
Mm.
lot of even early kings from the very early kingdoms, you see, take the Gupta age, for example. Nobody has bothered us about the Gupta era, right? But they could have, because
No,
that's
of course, there are questions being asked on whether, the Chola dynasty will be shown as a larger chapter or not. And of course, the Maratha Empire has been welcomed by a lot of sections. There were also questions about why Tipu Sultan has been removed from, Karnataka. And therefore, my other question
not
to you is,
removed.
how do you balance that
Not removed.
history and regional?
I repeat that nothing has been removed. So we had to make certain choices. And we look at the student and we say, okay, what is it that is going to really matter in the end? Tipu Sultan, a lot of people speak about Tipu Sultan. First of all, let us see what happens in the second part of grade 8 textbook. And I cannot anticipate on this because it's still under preparation. But if you're going to look at Tipu Sultan, there were many other very important personalities in India. And
Mhm.
I had to go very quickly over a few, just a few. So therefore, I use this image often. To deal with Indian history is just like dealing with the totality of European history. Can you imagine that we tell the history of Europe from prehistory to the 20th century, and this to be done over just a few chapters? How do you do that? It's feasible. You can even tell the entire Indian history in one page if you want. But then how
Mm.
superficial will you be getting? We have to make choices. So we do them in our best judgment. And I have also said, by the way, in some note which I put on my LinkedIn network, I've also said that we're not claiming that the textbooks are perfect. And we are open to positive suggestions. We're not open to demonization. For example, I've seen articles saying this is a Hindutva agenda, this is dictated by the RSS. Oh, this is just stupid. So we can't use this kind of feedback. It doesn't help us in any way. But if there are intelligent, positive suggestions on how we could have done something better, this can be considered because the textbooks will be revised, from year to year or maybe every 2 years, I don't know. But there will be, of course, a process of revision. And therefore, preparing these totally innovative new textbooks in such a short time with a completely new pedagogical approach, we cannot claim perfection at the first go, obviously.
So having said that, why would you say that if people are coming to you and articles are being written that this is promoting Hindutva or RSS agenda, why would you call that a stupid argument? Because that seems to be the largest allegation that is being currently made on
Well,
the
the
NCRT,
word
sir.
stupid was a very polite word because I have to remain polite. It's actually shows total lack of engagement with the textbooks. People who have made these allegations have not read the textbooks to begin with. They have prepared their critique of the textbooks even before they were published. They already knew what they were going to write, right? I'm very clear on this. They have not paid any attention to the textbooks at all. They've just pounced again on one or two paragraphs at best, and often misquoting them. For example, I'll give you an example. One great figure on TV media, I will not name him, said that we had written on the Muslim era as a dark age in Indian history.
Yes.
Totally false. Totally false. We never did that. We never did that. What we did was to write a note on the darker chapters of history all over the world, across the world. We just wanted to say, because we had to confront the fact that earlier textbooks tended to sanitize or lessen the conflictual aspects of history. Anywhere in the world again. Well, of course, they were more free when it came to world history outside of India. But the point is that we didn't want to sanitize history. We want to look at history honestly, without, of course, including too much of, gruesome aspects, because you can go on endlessly, of course, about them as well. So we wanted to be honest to history, and we wanted to prepare the students to the fact that there will be unpleasant aspects of history, and we should not, first of all, hold anyone today responsible for past events. And this we repeated in a chapter. It's twice, you will find it twice in the grade 8 part 1 textbook.
Yes.
And we wanted also to prepare the student that we have to look at these aspects squarely, honestly, because that's the only way to hopefully prepare a better future, to learn the lessons of the past. If you're going to sanitize the past, you will never learn the lessons of the past. And this is something we've seen happening again and again in India and sometimes in other countries of the world. So therefore, this allegation that we had portrayed any particular period of history as a dark age was completely false. The man, obviously, I'm almost tempted to name him, but I won't. The man had not even opened the textbooks, and he was making these very loud allegations. So there have been a lot of similar allegations. I can repeat what I've said again and again. Neither the RSS, nor the BJP, nor even the government of India interfered in any manner with the preparation of these textbooks.
But then yet again, the larger context here seems to be that you're saying that history will no longer be sanitized for children, and it will be portrayed and shown as it happened, as it was. Whether it was, the Mughals doing forced conversions under the guise of jizya, and whether it was Indian kings and rulers who were attacking villages, because there was a question there is that, every Indian ruler, when he went to annex, a territory, there were attacks that happened on other Indian, so-called indigenous Indians at that point of time as well. And that seems to be hidden behind the guise of Muslims doing forced conversions, sir.
No, you can't generalize. First of all, there was always warfare, okay, in Indian history. From the, maybe not in the Harappan civilization, but that's another issue altogether. But let's say from the early historical period onward, let's say from 800, 700, 600 BCE onward, there was always warfare. And this we have said. You can please read the textbooks. This is very clear. But there is limited evidence that by and large, in the early phases, let's say for the first 1,000 years of Indian history, the local population was not too badly affected. There was no systematic sacking of cities, no systematic taking revenge on the local population. There is even a Greek testimony from a Greek, I forget his name now, a Greek historian, who says that even while warfare is happening on the battlefield, the peasant can continue to peacefully plow his field. There is such a testimony. So I'm not saying that this would be 100% true, but by and large, I said this used to be the phenomenon. Something changes. Of course, there was already a first taste of this with Alexander during his invasions, because the record of the Greek writers again is that he sacked and destroyed a few cities and put the whole population of 2 or 3 cities in Punjab and Sindh to the sword. But that was for a brief while, just 1 or 2 years of his campaign. After this, it's a fact that when invasions happen from the 8th century onward, and foreign invasions, it's a fact that you see a lot more brutality imposed on the local population. However, when it happens also by non-Muslim rulers, if you allow me to use this phrase, we have mentioned it, and it may still be mentioned still again. For example, we mentioned, quite honestly, the Maratha campaign in Bengal, which led to quite a lot of atrocities, and we did mention it. So people said you've glorified the Marathas. It's not true. But we spent some pages on the Marathas because there is this wrong conception that the British basically took over India from the Mughals, defeated the Mughals and took over India. It's not true. They had to defeat a lot of regional powers.
Hmm.
And the Marathas were those in the larger control of the subcontinent.
So what about Tipu Sultan then?
Tipu Sultan did not control a very large area at all.
So, but regionally, it's important. That's what my question is. How do you balance
We have not
regionalism?
been able to mention a lot of regional powers. For example, in Bengal, there were still sultanates happening here and there. And we have not been able to mention all of them because in that case, the volume of the chapter would have doubled. And that was our dilemma.
Would we see that kind of balance between the heroes of freedom fighters or rulers at the national level being talked about, and even regional
So the
people
freedom
getting in? Because
fighters,
you've mentioned Lachit Borphukan. Lachit Borphukan was never mentioned before in the textbooks on a national level, of course, from Assam.
so when we,
So,
yes, that's true. When we come to the case of the freedom fighters, and I think it's good we discuss it very briefly, we are encountering a very similar dilemma because there were, as we all know, thousands of freedom fighters. If you start from, let's say, 1900 onward till the independence, across India, thousands of them. And we've already received representations from MPs, MLAs, public figures, which come to us usually through the Ministry of Education, that this person has to be taught to the student and that freedom fighter has to be included and so on and so forth. It's not going to be possible. You cannot, how do we do that?
so MPs and MLAs are approaching you to include
Not
their
approaching us
regional
directly,
heroes.
not approaching us directly, but there have been many letters since the NEP was published. There have been many, many letters addressed to the President of India, to the Prime Minister, to the Minister
All
of
right.
Education, sometimes directly to the Director of NCERT, and all these letters come to us. And we look at them.
Okay.
Most of them cannot be used because a few of them have actually given good suggestions. But they've been the exception rather than the rule. The rule is this must be taught, that must be taught. Our point of view is we're not going by what must be taught. We're going by why should this be taught and how should this be taught. It's not the what which matters to us anymore under the NEP. It's the why and the how. And people do not understand this at all. And this is the difficulty we are facing. So therefore, we're going to give a caveat that we cannot possibly do justice to all the freedom fighters. It's just not possible. One day, when all Indian schools have access to the internet, and we are very far from it, probably half of the schools, I don't know what the official figures are, do not still have a reliable access to the internet. No, in the way all the school students could use the internet.
Yes.
So if that happens one day, then of course it opens the door to a lot of supplementary material. And also there's another very important factor that the state councils for education, research and training, SCERTs.
Yes.
And NCERT is, of course, central government. The SCERTs are given, I understand, some freedom to add regional content. Or maybe even remove some of the content that they find not so relevant in their particular state, and then replace it with, regionally relevant context. That is absolutely fine. And I hope they will use that freedom given to them. Meantime, what we are doing is really to try to focus on, again, the big ideas, the big exchanges between freedom fighters. For example, if you take Mahatma Gandhi, if you take Ambedkar, if you take Subhash Bose, you get very, very different approaches to how to achieve freedom. We want students to think about that. We want students to and we're not going to be judgmental. We're not going to tell them this person was right and the others were wrong. It's not our job to do that. What we have to do is to tell them what Gandhi stood for, what Ambedkar stood for, what Subhash Bose stood for, and Tilak before them, and so on and so forth. So we can only select, a certain range representative of the different approaches to how to achieve freedom, and just let the student reflect about this. That's our job, and people
So
don't.
for the yeah. So for the second part of the books, could you give us a sneak peek on any freedom fighter that's not been
Oh, no.
mentioned yet into NCRT books who's going to be added this time?
No, I can't do this because that
Some
particular chapter is still at
so
draft.
someone like Veer Savarkar, who's never been part of the NCRT syllabus earlier, will we see an introduction to him in the further books?
Very honest answer, I don't know. As of today, I don't know. I can't answer this question. And if such a person, forget about V.S. Savarkar, there are other, very controversial figures here and there. If at all a controversial figure has to be brought up, it should be along with the genuine controversy attached to him or her, right? And again, something that allows the student to think about that. It's not that we should not, and this I've been saying again from the beginning, people don't trust me on that, it doesn't matter. But I've said we should not use the mind of the student as the battlefield for our controversies, right?
Mhm.
Or our ideologies. That is betraying the student. Our honest duty to the student is simply to equip him or her with the very important developments, events, ideas, concepts, figures, blah, 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 and equip him or her to learn to reflect upon them. That's all we should really be doing.
Mhm.
We are not there to indoctrinate the student in any manner. Of course, people are not, I mean, those who are already ideologically biased are not prepared to trust that, and this doesn't matter. In 5 to 10 years, the scene will change and people will realize that our attempt was really an honest attempt.
So, how long would it take you to bring out the class 7 part 2 and class 8 part 2 textbooks now?
Well,
Are the syllabus revisions in the final stages?
syllabus revision is almost final, but as I said at the beginning, before the year end, an exact date is a bit too early to commit, but I do hope that in October we can have them. More precise than this, I cannot say. And this is a question actually you have to keep asking NCERT. I'm not really the person to ask this question, right?
Of course. And so, having said that, the new books will look at the seventh class part 2 will look at the era till the Indian independence.
You mean class 8 part 2?
Class 7 part 2.
No, 7 part 2 doesn't do that. And again, you are looking only at one theme out of 5, I remind you. So
Okay.
7 part 2, part 1 ended with the Gupta Empire, the Gupta age.
Yes. Yes.
So, and 8 part 1, and it's a bit odd that we have to work in this manner, but anyway, that's how we have been asked to work. Grade 8 part 1, as far as Tapestry of the Past theme is concerned, started at the early 13th century. So 7 part 2 is precisely dealing with the period in between the two. That's as simple as that. That's the logical sequence. Coming to grade 8 part 2, I think I've already mentioned that we start from 1857, where part 1 ended, and we go all the
Yes.
way to 1947, independence of India.
Okay. And then that will end at the Indian independence.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Really
All right.
contemporary, I mean, in the history of independent India is, of course, extremely fascinating and important. But, again, these 3 years, one theme, already this totality of Indian history up to independence was a huge challenge. And the reason why we wanted to do this huge sweep of Indian history, let's not forget, is because a lot of Indian students drop out of school in class 8, at the end of class 8. Minister of Education has published the figures somewhere. I forget them, but it's quite a few
Yes.
lakhs, if not millions of students. So therefore, we wanted those students to at least have been exposed to this totality of Indian history up to independence. Contemporary India, post-independence India is something that I hope the secondary stage, classes 9 to 12, will be dealing with in greater depth.
The NCERT recently released a special module on partition of India, and they blamed the Congress and Jinnah for having agreed to the partition and having implemented the partition in India. Will something like this also be replicated in the class 8 part 2 textbooks?
Too early to answer. But as I said, we're going to try to be as objective and fair as possible. That's really all I can say at this stage. We're not going to blame anyone. We're going to say these are the different factors that, contributed to the partition. And maybe we will engage the students in a kind of mind game. How could the partition have been avoided? Why not? But this is something that pops into my mind this very moment. So I don't know. This is something to be explored. That's exactly typically the kind of exercise that we like to engage the student in, reflecting upon history. So rather than a blame game, it's about understanding the various factors and of course the consequences. What was the legacy of that partition? We have to, even though we don't want to go into post-independence history, we will still have to ask that question.
So you're saying that there will be no line in the textbook that will say that Jinnah, the Congress, and Lord Mountbatten were responsible for the partition of India. Am I correct?
I cannot answer this
You're
question.
not good.
No, I cannot. It's not that I don't want to. It's that I cannot, because it's still at a very early draft. And this is going to go through multiple reviews, and we're going to ask multiple feedback from a variety of people. So I really don't want to anticipate, because I have already anticipated more than I should have, because it might not do justice to the ultimate version of the textbook. Let us see.
All right. All right. So thank you so much for speaking to us, because as you said it, history is going to be unsanitized. It's going to be shown as it happened, as it were, and nothing is going to be glorified, is what NCERT is trying to do right now.
It's going to be as honest as possible.
Honest and unsanitized. No sanitization of history. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to us.
Thank you, Mrs. Milan, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.